Direct from historic downtown Orange, California, it's time for the Bob Gurr Show. From undersea adventures to highways in the sky, he's done it all. And now, here's your host, the man, the myth, the Disney legend, Bob Gurr.
Hey kids, I have Charles Phoenix today on the Bob Gurr Show. Welcome to Charles Phoenix.
Hello, Bob Gurr. How are you?
Oh, we're going to have a grand time. What fascinates me most is that most people, they know you without knowing you in a way. If you go on the internet, you want to see photographs of cars, mid-century cars and mid-century people, mid-century shirts. It's Charles Phoenix. He's so well known, I don't have to tell you too much, but I would like to share with some of the things. If you're kind of new to the Bob Gurr Show and kind of new to Charles, he has main interests. His main interests, he's a humorist, historian, author of American pop culture, chef. He's most recognized for his Disneyland tour of downtown Los Angeles, widely known for his retro slideshows. My God, I think he's got 250,000 slides, not all at once for his shows. His main interest, believe it or not, looking at him, mid-century architecture, fashion, and photography. All of that all rolled into one. I'd like to know more about the real Charles Phoenix. And I'll tell you why. Some of the interviews that I've watched over the years that are very substantial, they're different than the typical bloggers or the typical contemporary talk shows where most of it is about, oh, aren't you famous? Look at all the things you've been doing. Look at all the famous people you can say you know, and you know all these things, all these competitive behind-the-scenes sort of things. No, the Bob Gurr Show does not do that. I have a guest. I want to know how that guest became successful. Here's one of the interesting things. It seems to me that people who have a successful, let's say an MO, their method of operating in life, there were some inherent seeds, like 3 years old to 5 years old. Most of that I find with a lot of people is there's something that are little tidbits of things that were either scary or shocking or exciting, and they don't connect to anything, and you always in your mind, I keep thinking, what was that thing? Oh, I'd like to go back and see what that was. So these are these little things. I call these seeds. These would be the seeds of your nature in a way. But as you grow along in life, you wind up that those are modified. Your nurture modifies those original seeds. And then it begins to, in hindsight, be a very successful path that you sometimes think, well, I'm an adult now, so I designed my own path. No, that path, I think, starts somewhere 3 years old to 5 years old. Reach back and tell me a couple of those things that maybe they don't make sense, but as we talk, maybe they will.
They totally make sense. What you said just makes complete sense to me. I can totally relate to that. I'll tell you, when I was 4 years old, I was in the neighbor's yard, and I was in the backyard all by myself. And I thought to myself, I want to make sure that I leave a mark on this world when I'm gone, that I want to make sure that the world knows that I lived. And so that was at 4 years old. But before that, the first thing I really noticed, I mean, to be honest with you, is, well, cars. Yes. I'm a car person, classic cars. So I noticed wheel covers, like in the twirling down the street. I must have been like, practically this big.
You saw hubcaps like a dog chasing a hubcap.
That's basically it. I mean, spinner ones were really the ones that really caught my eye as a little kid. But then the other thing, seriously, not joking around, I mean, that's not joking, but is when I was this big, again, we're at Disneyland. My mother loved Disneyland, so I grew up in Ontario, California. We used to go to Disneyland. I mean, not that much, but, probably 2 or 3 or 4 times a year. And every time that I was at Disneyland, from the time that I was old enough to possibly even form a thought, I could easily say to myself, there is no place better than we ever go. This is the ultimate. And so I paid attention at Disneyland. And, I was really educated by I'm a visual learner. And I was very educated by Disneyland, and it completely formed, I mean, not 100% formed, but it formed a lot of my sensibility. And the other place I paid attention was shopping malls. I loved to see the trends. I mean, back in those days, back in my day, listen to me, I'm saying back in my day to you. I love that. But I know. But the funny thing is that, in the 70s, the late 60s and 70s, when I started really paying attention in malls, trends like fashion changed really quickly. Like every year it would look a little different. And I paid attention to that. That was very important to me. So, I mean, those are the kind of things. My dad was a used car dealer as well. So I got very educated in the realm of old cars. So convenient for me that I was already interested just watching the wheel covers go by. But there was a whole 4 car lots full of cars for me starting at the age of 4 to go down there every Saturday and drive around. So, I mean, pretend to drive around.
Okay.
Pretend driving. You're
right. Sit in there and do your own shifting and
right.
Make the motor with your mouth. Yeah.
They were all 4 speeds, by the way.
Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's, you're right. I mean, it all formed early, and I feel like really at the end of the day, I'm basically the same person I was at the age of 4. I mean, I was kind of a ham in class. I was kind of a loudmouth in class. I was never, I always, I was always able to get a laugh, from the class or whatever. Terrible at sports. So I had to live with it. I mean, it's like, that was not good. It was a little humiliating at times to be bad at sports. But then finally I realized it doesn't matter because I can talk.
Ah, well, you're very unusual from the standpoint that you didn't have to maneuver and drift around a little bit. It's like, boom, as soon as you were in the cradle, oh, I see the spinners on the hubcaps. Oh, now I can walk. Oh, my father has all these classic cars. And I understand by the time you were 6 years old, you could name every make and model and year.
Well, I learned to all the different makes and models and everything. That was just very important to me.
Yeah.
It was very important to know that.
Yeah. See, that was what you just told me, and just that little, not necessarily a quirk, but an excellent habit, meant you are a natural, curious person, highly observational. A lot of people don't ever really develop that during their life, so they miss a lot of things, but somehow it's almost as if 4, 5, 6, you are a professional at enjoying the world around you. And from what little you say about school, you must have been a born entertainer.
In a way.
In school. Did you ever get in trouble because if you were a bit flamboyant in class?
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I would get in trouble at school would be for one reason and one reason only: talking too much. That was my thing, talking too much. So, I really wasn't the greatest student, really. I mean, I learned to read and write in kindergarten, read and write before anyone else in kindergarten, like cursive or whatever. Remember cursive?
Really?
I know. Yeah. So, but the thing is I am a visual learner. That's why Disneyland, was so thrilling to me. I know it's thrilling to everybody, but it was so easy for me to figure out the style guides of the lands. And then 1 minute after we left Disneyland, we're driving down the street and I would say, oh, the Frontier Motel or whatever. Oh, I get it. That's Frontierland style. And then there'd be like, one that's more suited to the Fantasyland style. I'm like, oh, that's Fantasyland style. So everywhere I go in the world from the time I was a young kid, I'm like, going like, oh, this reminds me of a particular land or style guide at Disneyland. And, I mean, the world is so themed. There's a lot of themes. And so, one time I was in Paris and I was driving down, not driving, I'm riding in a boat down, what is it called? The Seine? I never had,
Seine.
The Seine, okay. Thank you. I was going down the Seine River and just the bridges were lit in a certain way, the lighting, the speed of the boat, the sound of the electric motor in the boat. I'm like, I said to my French friend, you know, this reminds me so much of Disneyland. Wrong thing to say to a French person. But anyway, it was fine. I mean, you know, I really find the style guide and everything as a result of having been educated at Disneyland, really. I mean, that's my education. As I said, I mean, school, okay. Disneyland was my school.
Well, what you just said, school, okay. And stop and think a minute. How many people have to be taught awareness or taught specific things? What you're telling me is you were a self-teacher at a high speed right from the get-go. This has got to be a blessing because you can absorb so much as long as your hard drive in your brain has got sectors you can plant all this material that you could draw on forever, which I think that's what you do.
Well, you know, I wasn't a great reader. I'm dyslexic, although they never said that, but I know I'm dyslexic. And I finally figured it out when I realized, you know, like 15 years ago only, like, oh, when I open a book to read, a page or a magazine, I always want to start at the lower right. And every single time I have to say, no, that's not where you start to read.
Oh,
you start at the upper left. Hello. You know,
Oh.
it's like I've had to tell myself. So I'm not the best reader in the world. I learned visuals, and that's how I got into collecting other people's old Kodachrome slides. It's like there's such a wealth of information in these images, you know, so I learn by looking, really, more than reading. I mean, I can read, and I do read, but I really only read for necessity. Like if I'm researching a subject or something, and I'm really going to be invested in needing to know this information, then I can actually read, but I can't read recreationally. It's just not that interesting to me. I can look at pictures and learn a lot. So I'm a visual person. I also realized, I don't know how many years ago, that I have a photographic memory. It's like, I just do. I mean, I can remember, you know, pretty close to what something actually looks like. I mean, if it's important to me, and there's a lot of things that are important to me.
Well, this is incredible because I've watched you for so many years, and you know, I obviously see pictures of it everywhere. Been to a number of your events. You've come to a couple of my events, and I never gave it a thought that you are so highly visually oriented and not so much pen and paper type of orientation. And you say that that's partly a kind of a dyslexic thing. Most people who have any kind of a dyslexia, they always try to not let anybody know, or they kind of have to work around the edge of something. But it looks like this is your main thrust that makes everything work.
Well, right, exactly. That's why I don't feel bad about it. It's like, you know, I was kind of given this toolbox in my head. Nobody's toolbox, no two people's toolboxes are the same. I've got this one, so let me figure out, you know, the best way that I know how to work with it. I'm also, you know, I've written several books. It takes me an hour and a half to write a sentence. I'm like the slowest writer, as slow as molasses to write a sentence, and let alone a paragraph, you know, and then I have to read it. I have to read very carefully, and I skip over words, and I a lot of typos. A lot of typos.
Well, I'm so glad you say that because a lot of people know me I wrote a couple of books when I was 20 years old, and then several in the recent decade, but I've never been able to learn how to type. I can't sing. I can't understand music. All the ordinary things that so many people do, they do with a great ease, and I never could figure out, why do I have to grind at some things? Like my spelling was always a D or below, but I always got a pass because it was hopeless.
Oh.
Even when I had algebra in the 8th grade, by the time I got to the 10th grade, I got an F in Geometry 1, and the teacher gave me an F and a pass, and the other kids said, no, you can't do that. And the teacher, Mr. Gordy, said, I do not want to see Robert ever again.
Oh.
I was cut off math at that point. It wasn't until Walt wanted me to design the tracks for the Matterhorn that I had to teach myself trigonometry. So I had to just bypass all that other learning and learn something that I could actually use. Today, I can tell when I'm going to have a dyslexic day. I know what I'm going to say, and I get ready to type it on the keyboard, I have the thumb for the shift, and this one goes around like that. And I look at the keyboard, then I look at the screen, and I say, oh my God, look at all that stuff. Can't get it right. There's something between, I have a thought. By the time it goes through all the muscle stuff and it runs out my finger goes to another key. And I have no idea I'm doing that. And then other days it's okay. So I'm glad you mentioned dyslexia, that you've taken advantage of, and I haven't been able to do that yet.
Well, you know, I barely even mention it. I barely even acknowledge it. But you asked me a question that kind of, you know, we talked about the visual learning aspect of Disneyland. And, you know, all the other thing about Disneyland, I mean, can we talk about Disneyland for a minute?
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, I also want to say, you know, a couple things. And that is, you know, as even the smallest little kid, as I mentioned before a few minutes ago, being there, I felt so lucky. And it just made me feel, it filled my spirit up so much. Not that I had a horrible life outside of Disneyland. We went a lot of places and did a lot of things and everyone was fine and all that. But Disneyland, hello. But, you know, it also made me feel, this is like, I don't know how to quite say this and I don't want to say it the wrong way, but so international, because it was the only place we ever went where, for example, I would see women wearing saris and I just thought, I'm part of the world. It made me feel like I belonged and that I was communicating with people, even though we weren't really talking to, you know, everybody there. And you'd hear people speaking other languages that you never heard anywhere but Disneyland. And I just thought, gosh, these people have come all the way to see this. And, you know, this is so thrilling to me to feel like I'm part of this worldwide community. It just gave me such a thrilling feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, here's a curious thing. I speak from the other side, working for Walt, asked to design things that go into Disneyland, mechanical stuff that fits architecture, fits the operational characteristic, what you buy and sell and everything. You're telling me the biggest attraction was the guests.
Well, no, it wasn't. It was just part of the experience. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, Disneyland is firing on more cylinders than any other place. You can go. I mean, maybe Disney World or whatever. That's a different story. You know, growing up in California, we didn't go to Disney World. So we know about Disneyland. Of course, I've been there several times since, but yeah, I mean, also, you know, the feeling going there now to Disneyland is like when I walk in the door, there's about, you know, when I'm walking on Main Street there, just at the very beginning, when you go under the train bridge, I feel like for about 10 to 12 seconds, like I own Disneyland. And then I'm like, oh, no, you don't own Disneyland. You know, I have to tell myself because I just feel so at home there. You know, it's like, it feels like coming home. And I also, the other thing is I feel like every age I've ever been, you know, when I'm there, I kind of feel really at the end of the day, I think I feel more like an 11-year-old about. I still feel like I'm about 11 years old there. I mean, that level of thrill, it never diminishes for me. And I'm not one of those people who go to Disneyland and go like, No, I don't play that game. Absolutely not. I don't have time for that. I'm there to appreciate Disneyland for what it is, the evolution. I mean, you know, last time I went there a few months ago, I'm like, I can't believe how many big, beautiful trees have grown up over all these years and how many trees they've planted and just, you know, to see the changes. I mean, I typically do kind of the vintage Disneyland, if you will. Of course, I want to see everything at least once, but really I go on all the classic rides. And by the time you go on all the classic rides, I mean, you know, you've been there from morning till night or the end of the day. When I was a little kid and we used to go there, we got there the minute it opened and we didn't leave until, I mean, it's not quite true, but it's almost like, I want to say we didn't leave until we were ushered out by security. We actually were not ushered out by security, but it sounds better that way. But we practically were. And the last thing we always did was to get a glass of orange juice on Main Street.
Oh, yeah. Walt, are you listening? All these ideas that you had, I watched you do this for 12 years. Charles actually got it. And completely thorough.
You know,
I hope you hear me, but...
Yeah, I hope you do too. But,
yeah.
you know, I don't know if Walt can hear me, but I know that you can hear me. And, you know, also, I have to say, I mean, the level of thrill that your work at Disneyland has provided us for all these years, and the extreme out of this world into the outer limits and beyond forever and for always high level of work that you did is spellbinding and hypnotizing to us to this day. Like the monorail design. I mean, everybody knows there's never been a more amazing looking rapid transit vehicle. That's the greatest one ever of all time. I mean, there's been other monorails. Yeah. I've seen them, you've seen them. Does anything come close? No. Not only that. Oh, sorry, I'm interrupting now.
Okay, no, I'll give you a hint that a lot of people may not know. Designing vehicles, amusement park equipment. Most people assume that a big corporation like Disney, building its very first monorail, would have departments of people doing research, would have engineers, electrical engineers, they'd have an interior designer, they'd have an automobile stylist on the outside. The truth is, when Walt was searching for his monorail, it was in 1952, he had a piece of typewriter paper and I wrote down all the things he wanted. Monorail was always there from 52 on up. Not until 58 did he accidentally find a monorail company that he made an agreement with. And Walt came to my office and showed me some pictures of the all-wake train that they developed, which is kind of looked like World War II German bomber type of design. It's just, it works, but it was not attractive. And Walt left me the pictures and said, Bobby, I want you to get started on ours right away. And he turned and walked away. Oh. Think of that. He left me with zero instruction. Think of this. How often do you, as a designer, have your pencil poised and you've been handed a blank piece of paper? And I'm not kidding you. Within days, I saw in my mind what that shape is going to be and the why and the drama of this thing. From that, I worked my way inward into all of the structural arrangements, suspension, electrical, drivetrains, all this stuff, which I'm not trained in, having never designed a monorail. But the fact that he gave you a free start with no constraints, you had to go out and fill all of the nooks and crannies that in the whole would produce a monorail in 8.5 months. Thereafter, all the other attractions he had me work on were the same thing. Bobby, I want you to get it started, goodbye. He did that to a lot of people, but that's something about Disneyland that I think led to its naturalness and its purity to people's eye, for example, which certainly attracted you, because a design was launched in purity of thought, literally right out of Walt's mouth. And to listening to you now, in my mind, I think, oh my gosh, you could not have a better connection than Walt saying, go, get started, and you telling me your side, 4 to 6 years old, of this is the entire rapture of your life. That's incredible.
Well, yeah, we could go on and on and on. But, one thing I want to talk to you about the monorail design, the original monorail design, if you Google it, I actually have vintage images of it, the Kodachrome slides that I collect.
Yeah,
but
here's one right there.
Yeah, 59, oh, there it is, right there, 59 Cadillac taillights that disappeared not too long after. What happened to those?
Well, the way the track was made, it was kind of an S-turn to back the train into the barn. When you pull the train out, it maneuvered a little easier, but when you back it up, the tires kind of let it drift over the beam a little bit, just enough that those taillights did not quite clear the bus bars on the bus bar side. It was okay on the other side, but the bus bar brackets would occasionally nick the lens and knock it loose. Oh. And we had to repair it several times. And then within only a couple of months, I went down one day and I was horrified. My 59 Cadillac taillights are gone. And the shop said, well, we just couldn't stop repairing. We just took it off. So I got used to the fact that that 59 Cadillac was such an inspiration because, hopping ahead a little bit, the guy in charge of Cadillac at that time was a good friend, Dave Holes, who I met in 1953 when I was working for an industrial design company downtown across the street from General Motors. So Dave Holes was primarily responsible for that entire 59 Cadillac, probably the most outrageous, good-looking 1958, where the Oldsmobile was a horrible-looking thing.
I love 58 Oldsmobiles.
Well, all that chrome down the
I know, people make fun of it. Look up 58 Oldsmobile, 98.
Yeah, Olds 98, right.
That's the stretched one.
But anyway, for those of you who are automobile historians, yes, I stole those right off of the back of the 59 Cadillac.
Well, they look even better on your monorail, really. I mean, it's so spectacular. But speaking of car designs, also your Autopia designs. I mean, the original cars, I mean, someone needs to tell you. I mean, as a person who loves cars, I mean, I secretly have always had a wandering eye for European sports cars, of course. I don't tell many people, but anyway, your original Autopia designs, I mean, that's a beautiful automobile.
Well, here's the funny thing. Up until Walt Disney wanted to have his own small car, normally an amusement park would buy them from a manufacturer.
Not you guys.
And Disneyland was offered a car, a German car, that Walt took a great dislike to, and that's how I wound up being asked to come in to design a body for a little chassis. Hey kids, welcome to the Bob Gurr Show Theater. Come on in.